What if the most dangerous man in America was just the guy who brought the potato salad to your neighborhood barbecue? In 1980, the perfect suburban father was hiding a dark secret in his freezer, and it wasn't meat. Welcome to Dumont, New Jersey. Back then, it was the picture-perfect American dream. Quiet streets, block parties, kids riding their bikes until the streetlights came on. If you lived on that street, you knew Richard Kuklinski. He was a massive guy, 6'5" and built like a brick wall, but to his neighbors, he was just a gentle giant. He was the guy who would jumpstart your car in the freezing snow, a regular at Sunday Mass, and a devoted family man. His wife, Barbara, adored him, and his kids looked up to him like he was Superman. But Richard had one strict, non-negotiable rule. No one was ever allowed to look inside the trunk of his car. Richard told his wife he dealt in currency exchange, which explained the weird hours and the piles of cash he sometimes carried. But his real currency was death. He wasn't a businessman. He was the most feared, untraceable executioner the New York mafia had ever seen. He worked for families like the Gambinos and the DeCavalcantes, and they loved him because he was a ghost. He wasn't Italian, he didn't hang out in the typical mob social clubs, and he had a clean criminal record. To the police, he was invisible. But to the mob, he was the ultimate weapon. He treated murder like a cold, scientific experiment, preferring crossbows, cyanide, and poison. The truly terrifying part was how he beat the system. When he killed someone, he didn't bury them immediately. He'd hide the body in an industrial freezer, keeping it frozen solid for weeks, sometimes even years. When he finally dumped the body on the side of a road, the summer heat would thaw it out just enough to fool the coroners. They'd check the body and conclude the person died 24 hours ago, but at that exact time, Richard would be sitting in the front row of his daughter's school play, surrounded by witnesses. He had the perfect alibi, and for over 20 years, he lived this dual life. By day, he was taking his family to Disney World. By night, he was tying men to chairs and leaving them in rat-infested caves. But even a ghost eventually leaves a footprint. In the early 80s, investigators found a body wrapped in garbage bags that still had ice crystals inside the victim's heart. That was the slip-up that launched a massive task force involving the FBI and the ATF. They realized they weren't chasing an ordinary criminal. They were hunting a butcher. It came down to Dominic Polifrone, a fearless undercover ATF agent who had to pose as a drug dealer to get close to Richard. It was a suicide mission. Richard was paranoid and killed his own partners without a second thought. But Dominic hooked him with the one thing Richard couldn't resist: high-grade cyanide. Over several weeks of tense meetings in diners, Richard opened up, bragging on hidden tapes about how he froze bodies and used his crossbow. Finally, on a snowy morning in December 1986, the trap snapped shut. Richard kissed his wife goodbye, expecting just another day. But instead, he was surrounded by tactical teams before he could even reach the meeting spot. When police raided his home, his wife was in total shock, screaming at the officers that they had the wrong man. She had spent 2 decades sleeping next to America's most prolific hitman without ever suspecting a thing. The real horror, however, didn't end with his arrest. Once he was behind bars, Richard started talking to psychiatrists, and what he revealed shattered everyone's image of him. Authorities thought he had killed around 50 men for the mob, but Richard just laughed. He confessed to over 200 murders, admitting that he had started killing long before he ever met a mafia boss. He didn't kill for business. He killed because he enjoyed it. He was already a serial killer when the mafia hired him, and they just happened to provide him with a paycheck for his favorite hobby. Richard Kuklinski died in prison in 2006, but his story leaves us with a chilling lesson. We spend our lives locking our doors to keep the monsters out, fearing the dark woods and the shadows. But the truth is, The most dangerous predators don't hide in the dark. They live right next door. They smile, they wave, and they politely ask you never to look inside the trunk of their car.